Good afternoon. Today I'm going to be reviewing the Cadisen C8200MWWU. This watch is available from Cadisen official store for €140. So firstly, let's look at the box that the watch comes in, and then I'll talk you through the other items one gets with the piece. The watch comes in a watch box which is protected by this black cobbled outer sleeve one removes, and this is the watch box itself. One removes the lid, and the watch sits in the base inside a foam cutout panel as one would expect. Although basic, it does suffice in protecting the watch in shipping, and I think it's perfectly acceptable to use this basic style of watch box, bearing in mind it's a low tier price point piece at €140. With a watch, one gets this owner's instruction manual in the form of a booklet one folds out, clear concise diagrams. The instructions are in English, and it details the operation of the movement use, which is the Miyota caliber 8215 automatic. This is the warranty card that comes with the watch, and I'm pleased to report the watch is covered by a 12-month international warranty. One also gets this Cadisen branded microfiber polishing cloth. I always think it's a nice touch to get a branded microfiber polishing cloth, irrespective of the price point of a piece. And lastly, one also gets this bracelet resizing tool. It's got a 1mm pin for pushing out the pins in the bracelet for resizing. No old shank to it, so it's good to get this included. So with regards to the specifications of the piece, this is the Cadisen C8200MWWU. We have a 40mm case diameter, we have a 49mm lug-to-lug measurement, a thickness of 11.7mm, and the integrated bracelet lug width at the widest point is 26mm, and the integrated bracelet tapers from 26mm at the lugs down to 20mm at the hidden 2-button push deployant clasp, and as you can see, the link over the deployant is signed with the Cadisen brand logo engraved to a high standard. Good firm resistance to the 2-button push triggers, and the deployant opens both halves with minimal resistance. Mirror polish to the top side, underside and flanks, and the deployant is solid milled 316L grade stainless steel. I like the firm resistance of the 2-button push triggers, and the deployant snaps shut with a nice positive click to both the left and the right hand portion, so it works very well. It's a well executed deployant clasp. With regards to the rest of the specification, we have a flat sapphire crystal. Now the negative of the flat sapphire crystal is there is no AR coating on the underside, and when I tilt the piece at an oblique angle, you can see there is a lot of glare and highly reflective nature due to the silver applied indices and the mirror polished silver baton hands. This piece would really benefit from the use of clear anti-reflective coating on the underside of the flat sapphire crystal, because there really is a lot of reflection, and it's compounded by the mirror polishing to the indices and the baton hands, so it really does need clear AR coating. But having said that, the symmetry of the dial is very good, the legibility is good, and also I like the symmetrical dial layout. The dial isn't over branded with unnecessary text or specification. A nice attention to detail, because Cadisen have applied their brand emblem in silver at the 12 o'clock underneath the double indices at 12, so it looks very good. I like the horizontal lines and the graduated blue dial. Date complication at 3 o'clock, we have a white date with black Arabic numerals, which is clearly legible, and I like the fact they've managed to fit in an index at the 3 o'clock position, because it retains the symmetry of the dial rather than just having a date window without any index, and I think it's very well executed. The chapter ring also has indexing at the hour marks, which looks very good, and I like the edge of the flat sapphire crystal because it's got a bevel which catches the light and it projects just above the top edge of the bezel. The bezel is solid 316L grade stainless steel, brushed satin finish longitudinally to the top edge, and also has 4 milled slots. And the edges of the bezel have a hexagonal profile to it and also a domed profile, which are mirror polished to a very high standard. Every facet of the edges of the bezel are mirror polished to a very good standard, and it's very eye-catching, very aesthetically pleasing. The head of the piece is brutalist design, and also it has elements of Gerald Genta design. It reminds me of the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak in its design of the bezel and also the head of the piece, and also the H-link bracelets formation. As you can see, the integration of the bracelet is very similar to a Royal Oak. Now, the negative of the head of the piece is it has a relatively long lug-to-lug measurement of 49mm. And this piece would really benefit from the use of female pivoted end links, as you can see, because the problem with using these fixed integrated end links in the bracelets is that they don't articulate very well. As you can see, the end link, which is integrated to the head of the piece, doesn't articulate as well as a female pivoted end link would do. Also, the links in the bracelet are very thick, so they don't really articulate as well if they were thinner. And I think that Cadisen could scale down the thickness of the block-like links, and therefore that would improve and enhance the articulation and therefore the comfort level, because it does feel like a very thick, heavy bracelet on wrist. So I'll show you the Caseback. It has a screw-down exhibition caseback which is glazed with mineral crystal. I like the edge of it, which reminds me of an Omega Planet Ocean or Omega Seamaster caseback. It's got that scalloped profile to it rather than the conventional milled slots for a screw-down caseback. Mirror polished scallops are finished to a high standard, no sharp edges, no burrs, and we have CNC lathe tool cut concentric machining to the underside of the screw-down caseback. The screw-down caseback provides an effective hermetic seal to 100 meters, which is perfectly acceptable, and the use of mineral crystal in the caseback is perfectly acceptable. Does a good job of displaying the movement, which is the Miyota Caliber 8215 automatic. It's a basic movement and it's undecorated, although it is good to have an exhibition caseback to show it off nonetheless. Relatively low profile, and it is perfectly smooth and flat, so it's very comfortable to wear for long periods of time against the wrist. So I'll give you a wrist shot and you can see how it fits on my 8-inch wrist. Now I haven't sized the bracelets, I've simply taken the watch out of the watch box, and I'm pleased to report it fits my 8-inch wrist perfectly without resizing. So if you have a larger wrist of 7 to 8 inches, the integrated bracelet will fit you no difficulty whatsoever. As you'll know from my previous reviews, I like to size my bracelets loose so I can fit an index finger underneath the bracelet and clasp at all times. This allows for wrist expansion in warmer weather or when one is active. The 2-button push hidden deployment works very well because one can just feel the triggers, but they're not going to accidentally become deployed if you touch against them when wearing the wrist and flexing the hand. So it works very well. So the bracelet is very aesthetically pleasing, beautiful luster to the brushed satin finishing to it. It's very well finished, no sharp edges, no burrs. And the taper is actually correct for a 40mm piece. The integration of 26mm down to 20 works very well. The 6mm taper over the length of the bracelet does look very good. Very well balanced piece. Now the thing to note is it is incredibly heavy with all the links in the bracelet. This is 180 grams and the heft is really noticeable, and I would say to you, if you're a collector with a smaller wrist of 6 to 7 inches, you may find the 180 grams of heft to be uncomfortable, too heavy to wear for long periods of time, such as 8 to 12 hours per day. But having said that, the heft does give it a feeling of quality, and if you have a larger wrist of 7 to 8 inches, you will feel that it balances very well on the integrated bracelet. Because it's got a wide 26mm to 20 taper, it distributes the weight of the head of the piece very well. It's surprisingly low profile at only 11.7mm. I would usually expect an automatic piece like this to be circa 13mm. So credit where credit's due. Cadisen have done a good job by getting this down to only 11.7, including the exhibition caseback. It's got a snug fit to the wrist. As you can see, the angular profile to the head of the piece and the integrated lugs means there isn't a large gap underneath the case, and it does sit very snug to the wrist at 11.7, so it will easily slip underneath a shirt cuff. 40mm is a nice size, but I think they could have scaled down the width down to 22mm and have it tapering from 22 to 18, alternatively 20 down to 16, which are the industry standards for a 40mm head of the piece. 26 to 20 is a rather large taper, although it does work well. The negative is it does add significant heft. So 180 grams is a very heavy piece, although it's very low profile. It's aesthetically pleasing due to the horizontal lines on the textured dial, and we've also got graduation. It's lighter blue in the centre, graduating to a darker navy blue at the circumference. So really the only main negative is the lack of AR coating, because as you can see, very shiny and reflective. Right, so let's test the crown. The screw-down crown provides an effective hermetic seal to 100 meters. Hexagon profile to it, brushed satin finish, and we have a brushed satin finish cap to it, and embossed we have the Cadisen emblem to a high standard. So let's test the screw-down crown execution. It feels smooth. Firm resistance to the threading, but that's down to the O-ring sealing the internal O-ring in the crown and the external O-ring in the crown tube, sealing the hermetic seal So it does feel smooth, although there is friction, one can feel the resistance of the threading. Pulling it out to the first click position is the quick set complication. So rotating the crown anti-clockwise, if you look at the date window, you can see the quick set complication clicks over to the next day of the month with a nice positive click. I like the solid indexing of it. Pulling it out to the second click position is the time setting position. Nice firm resistance to the caliber 8215. I like it. No backplay clockwise and anti-clockwise. However, the negative of the Miyota caliber 8215 is it doesn't hack. If you look at the second hand, you can see I'm now in the time setting position, and unlike the NH35A, the second hand doesn't stop dead, it continues to run. Later versions of the 8215 do have hacking, so it's a disappointment that Cadisen are using the earlier version of the 8215 without hacking, because the latest versions of 8215 do have hacking. Also, I would prefer to see a higher grade of movement such as the 8315, which has hacking and also benefits from an increased power reserve. This has 40 hours, but the 8315 has 60 hours, and it is compatible. They're both the same dimensions, so they could have potentially used the 8315 or alternatively the later version of the 8215 to have hacking. So pushing it back in has a nice positive click. Let's test screwing it back down. Immediate thread pickup. So the screw down crown works very well. I'm just going to unscrew it once again and test the hand winding, because the movement has hand winding but no hacking. So in the unscrewed position, before pulling it out to the date setting position, we are now in the manual wind position, and one can manually wind the caliber 8215 to top it up to its maximum 40-hour power reserve. One can feel the tension in the mainspring gradually building up. It feels nice and smooth to manually wind. One can feel the gearing, but there's not a lot of friction. It feels very similar to manually winding a Seiko NH35A, which you'll all be familiar with. So the manual winding works very well, and also screwing it back down works very well too. Very good. Right, so let's do a Lume test, and we'll see how the Lume performs when it's charged up to the absolute maximum. So as always, I'm going to use my 100 UV LED torch to charge it up to the absolute peak. Right, so that's now fully charged, and as you can see, it's disappointing because there's a colour mismatch between the baton hands and also the applied indices. On the baton hands, they have a darker blue tone to the lume used, and it's clearly Luminova, not BGW9 Super Luminova. On the applied indices, it looks more like BGW9, although one can clearly see it's not as bright as BGW9 Super Luminova. So Cadisen have clearly used two different tones of blue Luminova, and I really think it's a disappointment. It's unacceptable regardless of the price point of the piece. Yes, I accept that this is a €140 low tier piece, but getting the tone of lume, the same blue colour on the indices and the hands, is a fundamental that a brand has to get correct, and Cadisen have failed to do it. It's a shame they didn't use the same tone of blue Luminova on the baton hands, because initially it's glowing reasonably brightly and it will continue to glow for a good length of time. The problem with these stick style of indices is they don't allow for deep lume plots. One can't apply 5 to 6 layers of Super Luminova, for example. The same applies to the baton hands. They don't allow for a large lume plot, a large area for 5 to 6 layers of Super Luminova to be applied. But they could have at least got the colour tone matched correct between the indices and the dial, the indices and the hands, because as you can see, the hands are clearly a darker blue. Now, on the indices, I would say the performance of the Luminova is better. On the hands, it's not as bright due to using that darker blue colour, and it's a shame because they had the option of doing it. They could have used BGW9, and instead they've used the cost-cutting measure of Luminova. So room for improvement on the quality of the lume, although it is performing to an OK standard. Right, so let's discuss the movement used. You'll all be familiar with the Miyota caliber 8215 automatic, which is made in Japan. It's a reliable, well-proven workhorse movement. It's been in use since 1977, so 45 years of use, therefore it is very well proven at this stage. It has 21 joules, it runs at 21,600 vibrations per hour and a frequency of 3 Hz. Now, the negative of the 8215 is the rotor. It has a unidirectional winding rotor rather than bidirectional, and personally I prefer bidirectional winding movements because they're more efficient. With this movement, it only winds when the rotor spins anti-clockwise. When the rotor spins clockwise, it has negligible winding effect, so therefore it's not as efficient. It has to wind anti-clockwise only. The other negative to the rotor is that it is noisy. And this is something I dislike about Miyota movements such as the 8215, the noisy rotor. It's noticeably noisier on wrist than the Seiko NH35A, which has a quieter rotor. So something to consider. Now this is subjective. Some collectors don't find the noisy rotor irritating, but I personally do. I think that the NH35A would have been a better option for this piece, or alternatively they could have upgraded to a better quality Miyota movement such as the 9015, which is quieter and it's a better grade of movement, higher quality. So as discussed, it has hand winding, but it doesn't have hacking. They could have used the latest version of the 8215, which does have hacking, or alternatively the 8315, which also has hacking, so that's a disappointment. The stated accuracy of the 8215 is -20 to +40 seconds per day, so a rather wide accuracy range. However, I'm pleased to report that Cadisen are well regulating the movements they're using. This one is running consistently at +10 seconds per day, which is well within the -20 to +40 seconds per day accuracy, and +10 seconds per day is good enough for this watch. Right, so lastly I'll summarise the piece. What do I think of it overall? Well, when I'm considering reviewing a watch on my channel, the watch should meet two criteria. It should be both excellent quality and excellent value at the respective price point. So €140 is the price point of this piece. Really, to evaluate it, one needs to study the quality of the finishing to the head of the piece and also the bracelet. Credit where credit's due. The quality of the brushed satin finishing and the mirror polishing to the head of the piece and also the brushed satin finishing to the bracelet are very good. No sharp edges, no burrs, and the bracelet does have a beautiful luster to it. So they have finished the head of the piece, the bracelet, and also, excuse me, the screw-down exhibition caseback are all finished to a very good standard. So the quality control, the build's quality, the materials and the finishing are all excellent. So I would describe the quality of the piece as excellent, regardless of the fact it has no AR coating and also has a mismatch on the colour of the lume on the baton hands and the applied indices. For €140, one has to expect some cost-cutting measures such as lack of AR coating and weak lume. But the quality of the finishing to the piece is excellent, so they deserve credit for that. Value is subjective, but I'm going to declare it as okay value. I'm not going to say it's good or excellent because €140 really is pushing it for a watch which is powered by an 8215, and it's the earlier version of the 8215 without hacking rather than the later version with hacking. If this had a higher grade of movement such as the 8315 with 60 hours of power reserve, then yes, I would say it was justified charging €140. Or alternatively, if it had a higher grade of movement such as the Miyota 9015, yes, I would say €140 would be the correct price. So the price is okay, but it's not good and it's not excellent. The quality is excellent with regards to the build's quality, quality control and finishing, but there is room for improvement with regards to the Luminova and also the AR coating. So these are the things I want you to be mindful of. So I'm going to recommend it to you for your consideration, but bear in mind the shortcomings. I hope you've enjoyed my review of the Cadisen C8200MWWU. Please feel free to post your own comments below the video. Thank you very much.